My name is Finn Hodgins. Welcome to the first episode of the Dare to Win podcast. And in this episode, I'm going to give you a background on my story and why I've decided to create this podcast called Dare to Win, and give you guys some context behind why I named it Dare to Win. So I think the appropriate way to start this will be to go back to my junior year of high school, which is when I tore my MCL and meniscus and had to get surgery on my knee. Just a prefix, a lot of this is going to be my story not going to college and transitioning into the professional world, and some of the key moments in my life that created mindset shifts for me and what that resulted into, which is me sitting here today creating a podcast called Dare to Win, where I'm going to share a lot of stories that helped me get to this point, stories about marketing, stories about building a startup, and stories about creating a company in the tech space. So without further ado, let's rewind the clock back to junior year Finn and where I was in that scenario. So basically, I was a baseball player, and baseball was everything for me. Everything I did revolved around baseball. I was a pretty good student. I went to a great high school, a Jesuit school, where I learned a lot of life lessons, including being a man for others. It was a school motto. It was called St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City, New Jersey. And baseball was what I wanted to do. I knew I wasn't going to be a professional baseball player, even though that's everyone's obvious driver. For me, it was more about wanting that extra 4 years in college to play, because baseball was my identity. I loved the sport. It was fun. I knew it was something I was pretty good at. I knew it would always give me that group of friends and sort of something to do with my life. I was a pretty good student, but I had no interest in academics or anything remotely education based in terms of what they teach you in school, which is probably not what, anyway, that's a topic for another podcast. But you can see another thing I like to do is go on tangents and fall off track, so stay with me. Hopefully I don't do that too much in this episode. But anyway, I was getting recruited for college. I was hoping to play in the Division II level, maybe a lower Division I school, and I tore my MCL and meniscus. And at the time I was about 250 pounds, so I was pretty overweight, and I just wasn't really physically at a great point in my life, or mentally, definitely not mentally. I was immature, I was just having fun, just had no real reference on diet, nutrition, lifestyle, etc. It ended up being the biggest blessing in the sky, because when I got to my physical therapy, I met a physical therapist who was the first person to change my life. Why he did, I don't know. Maybe it was simply for the reason that I wanted to look like him. The guy was jacked. His name was Mike, and he just radiated this confidence, and there was something about him that I really liked. I thought, wow, this guy has a really cool job. He gets to be around young athletes all the time and help them. And he worked out a lot. And I always wanted to get in really good shape. I just never really knew how, and I was scared. Like anything, the fear held me back. And that was the first moment in my life where I had to do a few things. I had to take matters into my own hands and figure something out. And I had to lean into the fear something created and just do it anyway, create my own reality. So Mike told me that my recovery time was probably going to be 8 months, and if I lost 40 pounds, it could be as quick as 6 months, because your weight is what bears your knee, and if you're lighter, you're just naturally going to recover quicker. So I took that to heart. I lost about 40 pounds in 6 months, and I got really obsessive about it and really into fitness. And like I said, that was a big turning point in my life, because it completely changed me as a person. I went from being immature and not really into bettering myself to all I cared about was getting better. And what that taught me, and the biggest lesson I got from it, was you can do anything you set your mind to. And it doesn't really require that much work it requires a lot of work. It doesn't require anything but persistence and having the mentality that I'm going to do this. And you give yourself no other option, but I'm going to do this. And I had been playing with the idea of losing weight a million times in my life, but this was the time I did it, because I just told myself, you are going to lose the weight. There's no other option. What I found from that mentality was it's almost relieving. It's like, okay, I'm going to lose this weight. Cool. Now what? And you just fall into the rhythm of doing it. And then you create some momentum, and an object in motion stays in motion, and voila, you end up losing the weight or achieving your goal. And fitness, I think another reason it was so monumental in my life is because there's so many parallels to entrepreneurship and fitness. You have to fail to grow, like breaking your muscles down in order for them to grow. You create your own reality. You have to take things completely into your own hands. You have to take ownership for things. You have to work hard. Nothing happens overnight. It takes a lot of time to create change. Long-term change is a result of consistency, compounding, just stuff like that that just literally draws direct parallels to entrepreneurship. And the type of person in fitness and entrepreneurship is very similar. Very much so a go-getter and just wanting to create and build, and is why I got the entrepreneurial bug. It was the mindset that it gave me of, wow, if I set my mind to something, I can probably create it. And if someone calls me crazy for doing it because it's unordinary, like going to the gym at 5 a.m. before school was, before sports practice, all that, whatever, that's just what I'm going to do. And I think it's going to make me better, so I don't care what you think. And anyway, that spiraled into me having a big mindset shift. It also made me better at baseball, and I ended up getting recruited to play at a junior college in Texas. And in baseball, junior college is pretty much parallel to the Division I level if you play at a good junior college. And the goal of junior college is to end up getting recruited by a Division I school afterwards. But that was exciting. I got hurt again. I got Tommy John on my elbow, and that was another blessing in the sky, because even though I did get a little better, my passion for the sport diminished as I grew my passion for fitness and entrepreneurship, and it just wasn't there anymore. The elbow injury was almost like it was a blessing for the reasons that I knew it was going to be the end of baseball, and it'd be a little more easier to transition out. The transition out was very hard because it's your whole identity, and it was going to be why I went to college. I really had no idea what I was going to do, because I knew I hated kind of everything college had to offer in terms of like future jobs and cap salaries. And I was very driven and had high ambitions. And I think I just realized the type of life I wanted. And so that made me take a gap year off school, which my plan was to figure out what I was going to do. And I knew the whole time I wasn't going to go to college. I can go on about reasons why I think college is a terrible idea for most people, especially in this generation, and especially if you don't want to be your doctor, lawyer, engineer, or anything that's like very education based. Like, obviously, I wouldn't want someone cutting my heart open who didn't go to a lot of practice school sessions. But I'm talking about for the person who is a lot like me, who I actually think a lot of people are like me, and they fall out of being like me, which is very creative, wanting to do a whole bunch of things because they're suppressed in the way they're taught to think and what they're told to do, which is what everyone does, and go to school, get a job, kind of the 99% of, what society does. And they follow the trends of end up being not so happy with their life and wanting a way out of their current job. And it's just a cycle. But to me, I saw very clearly in high school that if you don't want to be like the average person, don't do what the average person does. Why everyone doesn't see that, I have no idea. But it is what it is. Another lesson I found in my life is when you go against the grain and you force change in your life, like really good things happen. And you break down limiting beliefs and barriers that people generally tell you aren't a good idea. Again, things always work out for you and you grow. So just like fitness, you got to break down to grow, or you got to force growth. So anyway, didn't go to school, took a gap year. My gap year was just a way to make my parents trust me by proving to them over a year of not going to school that I was going to be okay as a 19-year-old man in the world. I wouldn't get eaten up by it, which, again, I don't happen to know why people think is going to happen to people. But anyway, I started selling things on the internet, and I wanted to learn how to make money. So I had 3 jobs. I was a busboy, which is great. And then my other 2 jobs were non-traditional, like typical hustler jobs. I was driving dead pig carcasses across the country for like local small butcher shops, and actually making a lot of money doing that in my parents' Chevy Traverse. Thank you, Mom and Dad. And I was working at a farm, helping them cut the microgreens off their R&D hemp plants. And I took that job because it was putting me around high-level people, very successful entrepreneurs, which I knew was a key And I remember I started reading a lot of books, and one of the books talked about building skill sets that can make people who already make a lot of money even more money, and provide value to them. And that's where I learned another huge lesson, that the way to make money in this world is to provide value to other people. And that is really all it is. It's providing value to other people and selling things. And so I was like, what skill can I learn that could provide value to these people who I'm currently cutting their little greens on for minimum wage? How can I make some more money with these people and feed my entrepreneurial gene, which I love so much? So I ended up learning how to sell things on the internet through drop shipping, selling my own products. I made merch for Game of Thrones fans, and I used influencer marketing, and I actually made some money, and I learned how to do it. So I went to this entrepreneur and showed him kind of the skills that I had acquired, and I asked him to practice on one of his brands, which was a physical brick and mortar company. I asked if I could sell their products online. We ended up doing like 10 grand in the first month, and I think the biggest thing that did was open his eyes to the power of e-commerce, which, by the way, going back to when I was doing the Game of Thrones products, I was very lucky to have had experience. I made $8,000 in a month at the age of 19 just by doing like a couple influencer marketing posts. At the time, influencer marketing was very like raw and unsaturated, so that was possible. Actually, this was selling fidget spinners when they were on trend. And I knew it was a trend, and I knew it was very lucky. But what that showed me and opened my eyes to was the power of the internet and the power of digital marketing and how fast things could happen. $8,000, like it was only 4 grand in profit probably. But at that time, that was like more money than I probably made in my life just from working summer jobs. So that's like a big shock to someone. And I was like, wow, I'm making as much money as I could have made my first 3 years out of school in a lower level entry job. So that was very validating to me, and that gave me this boost of confidence. And that was the kicker where I was like, no, I am not going to school because I can do something here. And anyway, I ended up getting a good gig with this entrepreneur doing that. And then New Year's of 2019, he went on to launch a new brand, and I got a call from him asking to be the first employee that they brought on under the CEO. And essentially my job was to build out the entire e-commerce operation. Now, I was very young, so I didn't really know much about business, but that experience taught me everything I needed to know because I worked in a startup at ground zero. We didn't even have packaging for a product. We were prototyping, and I saw everything. I worked alongside the CEO every single day, and I got to test out my theories and ideas. I made a lot of mistakes, but luckily I was protected and they were willing to let me grow with them. And I did that. And fast forward a couple years, and the brand raised money and grew exponentially and was doing very well. And that experience as an entrepreneur, I was always right below the CEO, and that helped me learn how to build a company. It taught me everything I would have learned, every single thing I would have learned from actually going out and starting my own company, except for the fact that I didn't take on any of the risk and have to spend any of my own money. In fact, I made money. Way better than any education could provide you, because I don't know, you just can't learn how to build a business or a brand from a teacher. You have to learn something like that from direct experience. The stuff that they teach you, like P&Ls and economics, you can get asked for a P&L, Google how to make a P&L, and in 20 minutes have your P&L spreadsheet. Whereas like the direct experience you get from talking to customers, being in a Shopify store or running Facebook ads, making ClickFunnels, negotiating with influencers or raising money from venture capitalists, that is irreplaceable, and you just can't like possibly explain it to someone in a sense that will relate to the real world version. And so don't waste your time with that, but again, that's another episode. So I would recommend anyone does what I got to do and be an entrepreneur. And I think that brought me to this point in life where I really wanted to do something for myself. And I'll rewind before I get into that, because I went on a tangent, and that's just what I do. So I'm going to need some guests on this podcast to pull me back a little bit, and so I can just let people talk and tell their story. But I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina in the start of the pandemic, because the pandemic was another key point in my life. I had gotten the job with the company and already had worked with them for a year. And the first year was hard because when you start a brand overnight, it doesn't blow up. The first year is typically very hard and lots of bootstrapping and grinding it out and just making things happen. And typically you don't see any money come in, so it can be discouraging. And I started to make money, and I lived in New York City. So I started to be kind of young and stupid. And COVID came at the right time for me because I was at this point where I was making some money, I was acquiring all these skills, but I was also starting to like really love the freedom I had and going out. And then COVID hit, so it shut everything down. And I was at this point where I was like, and I just turned 21, so it was like absolute perfect timing when I look back. And I remember when COVID hit, I saw a bunch of stuff on social media. This is the great reset. This is the time where you should take a step back and relax. And this happened because everyone burnt out. And I was just like, that's totally BS. This is the time where you can just set yourself a million miles ahead of everyone who's going to be lackadaisical and work from home in their underwear and clock in 2 hours when they should work 8, and whatever the case may be. I just knew it was going to be a great opportunity to get ahead and just go for it. Because to me, it was an excuse not to have to hang out with people and to actually be able to put my head down and acquire skills that were going to make a difference in my life. So I ended up doing so many things that first three months of COVID. I bought a house, a real estate investment. I think I was 20 or 19. And I did everything through the bank, pull out the loan and run all the P&Ls and put the down payment down. And all the way up to the end of like the transactions done, I actually like legally, technically had already bought the house. It was $150,000 or something, 4-bedroom, 2-bath. It would have been a great investment looking back. I totally missed one. But the reason the seller was selling was because she was relocating to a city, and then the pandemic was clearly lasting a long time. So she changed her mind basically, and I was not going to just take her house. Yeah, I was nice about it. But anyway, so I did that, and great experience. Taught me a lot about financing, going through the bank, real estate, how great of an opportunity that is, and how low the barrier to entry is for people. And so that taught me some things that led to future investments. And then totally up my digital marketing skills. I learned how to run funnels and how to make money off lead generation, which was a key skill, which led me to be able to consult other brands when I relocated. But once I saw COVID was going to be a pretty big deal and last longer, unfortunately, New York was more closed than other states. So I decided to move to North Carolina just off a whim. And I relocated to Charlotte. And I felt like I needed something like extreme in my life to keep me focused and force me to grow. I learned from just looking back that I always made the most progress in my life by putting my back against the wall and forcing growth. So I decided to train for an Ironman when I relocated to Charlotte, because the mindset stuff from fitness is always parallel to business. And I knew it would be a good idea for like reasons of making me grow mentally, just putting a challenge in front of me. I was a big fan of David Goggins, and if you're mentally tough, you can get through any physical challenge. That anything that is not physical and is just mental is going to feel easier and like a piece of cake. So I moved to Charlotte, trained for the Ironman, and what was going to be simultaneous to that was I was going to document it all on YouTube, which I did. And I wanted to be like a presence in the fitness space online. I wanted to build a personal brand so that I can create a company that stemmed off of fitness in the future. But I quickly realized when I started filming that that wasn't for me. I wanted to do something a lot more macro. And when my eyes lit up the most in the work I had done in the past, and still did with the brand I was working with, was when they were on calls talking to future investors, talking to their board, talking about their big plans and how they were going to take market share and roll out new products and stuff like that. And that's when I knew that I needed to be something like that, bigger than being just a personal brand in the fitness space. And that had nothing to do with the Ironman. I loved training for the Ironman, and I did so all the way up to I retore my meniscus before the race, which was a shame. But anyway, I did that because I needed the discipline. So that taught me a lot about being robotic in the sense that you should just see and do what's on your schedule. It taught me a lot about achieving things well beyond when you think you're tired or what you tell yourself is being tired. And those lessons, again, made me grow quite a bit in business. I would tell anyone, especially people who are young, to do things very hard physical challenges parallel to work you're doing in business because it will make you grow. I wanted to run this Ironman, so I took massive action and I did so. I wanted to move to Charlotte, so I took massive action and I did so. I wanted to not go to college, so I took massive action and I did so. I wanted to acquire a skill to pitch an entrepreneur when I was 19, so I took massive action and I did. And that's like the first highlights and trends I want to pull back to relate to the name of this podcast, Dare to Win. Taking massive action is something that I hope I can share with my audience that I build. I just want to share things that I learned throughout my journey in life and kind of document it side by side as I do grow. And bringing it back to Charlotte, when I tore my meniscus, I ended up going home and I geared up to think about what I was going to do next. And I knew that would be something that took all the skills I learned and was mine and sold something. And it wasn't until I had been talking to my co-founder Claire, where she had built this huge community of her own, and we were just bouncing ideas back on how she could monetize. The idea for Grouped came up, and the original idea for Grouped was far different from what it ended up becoming, but that evolved over time, and that conversation led to us co-founding Grouped. And Grouped is a product that allows brands to create private communities, very similar to Wix or Shopify. You can log on and build your own website. On Grouped, you can log on and create your own private community, which kind of syncs up to your website. But that's what I ended up working on, and that was this huge shift from anything I thought I would do, but it was because the time was right, the idea was great, and it had that macro potential that I craved. And I wanted to lead a team in something that had that potential, in something that was aligned with my past work, and something that I knew the market front to back. And I just knew that community marketing was the way to drive sales when you have an audience, and it was the missing link for a lot of brands. So anyway, it all just came together and it made sense. And creating a software product, it's been a beast, and it's been a lot of these skills I've learned have had to really come into fruition and come into play. And a lot of the mindset stuff I learned that I hadn't really gotten to execute in my past, I had to pull upon them, execute them, or I realized these things that I had learned, raising money and all this stuff, and it was like, okay, now I actually have to do it, because I've read about it, I've listened in on it happening, now it's my turn. Like I said, we had this idea, we built out a plan how to do it, I knew how to execute, I knew how to build a startup from my past. This was a lot scarier, like every time I leveled up in my life it gets scarier and scarier, but I just jumped and I said, okay, let's do it, and jumped right in, and we haven't looked back since. We're launching in the end of May, which is very exciting, but the point is, you know, like I said, all these points in my life are just the same thing. It's this time where you have to break a limiting belief, you have to lean into a bunch of fear, and you have to take a leap of faith and feel the fear and do it anyway. And I think the reason I really want to make this podcast is because a lot of the people who I grew up around, or people who I've seen, or younger people, they're always held back by fear. And they never really do what they want to do because they listen to society and their parents and their old teachers and all these people before they actually listen to themselves and do what they want to do. And the reasons that they have are so lame. It's just fear, and they think it can't be them or all this crazy stuff. And the truth is, it's not very hard to do the more entrepreneurial, non-traditional stuff and to create for yourself and to use the internet to make money. It's just a matter of taking a leap of faith and being okay with people calling you crazy, or going against the grain, or people being funny around you. Like little things I think I just see so much of, and I feel so bad because when I didn't go to school, the same people who called me crazy kind of the first year, their freshman year, the second they graduated, they asked me, where can they get a job, or how do they do this or that or this? And by no means am I knocking anyone down or anything. I'm just saying this is what I noticed. And I had this sense of security the whole time that I was growing while they were wasting time during that 4 years they were in school. And it should totally be the other way around according to what society says. And I just feel bad that the option isn't broadcasted enough, that like you can create your own reality without doing what you're supposed to do. And obviously the world is changing, so I'm sure in a couple years there will be way more people who took the non-traditional route. And like I said, maybe I'll just end up being like totally not successful, but I feel like I'm at this turning point in my life where everything is starting to fall into place, and I want to document the story while it's happening and just share my experiences and continue to break those barriers instead of wait for it all to happen and me wishing I documented it. So that's my first episode of Dare to Win. Hope I can inspire a lot of people with this podcast to take the chance in their life to win. I think Dare to Win is a very powerful term, and it revolves around my favorite quote, which is feel the fear and do it anyway. That comes from a book, I think it's the book Make Your Bed, although I could be wrong about that. But feel the fear and do it anyway has been monumental in my life because I don't believe any successful person is truly fearless. I think the difference between people who are great and the people who just stay mediocre is when people is a relationship with fear. So instead of just attacking it straight on and leaning into it when you feel it and using it as a sign of, wow, this is scary, I should attack that. Because typically fear comes from things that are going to move you forward. I don't know why it works like that, but it does. And most people, they back down from fear because they're creatures of comfort, honestly. And that's something I should have talked about when I talked about the Iron Man and stuff. It's forcing things that keep you uncomfortable. If you're just cool with being uncomfortable, you get this weird satisfaction from being uncomfortable because it's going to lead to growth. And so that's what I want to inspire people to do with this podcast, is to dare, which means to take the risk of attacking your fear and to dare to win. Because essentially when you attack your fear, on the other side of that is success, victory, or winning. And I think the other thing I really want to do is share all my failures, because I had so many of them, and failures are, it's such a bad word to me. It's an F word because it has such a negative stigma around it, but a failure is just a necessary object or path or stepping stone on your way to winning. A failure is moving forward, and people get so scared to fail when really what you should try to do is fail faster. It's just another thing that I just want to break molds to you guys listening and share my relationship with these key kind of concepts in life that happen to hold so many people back. But if you just adjust your relationship and your way of thinking around them, it could actually move you forward significantly. So before I continue to ramble on, I'm going to wrap this up. And one more thing, I'm also going to bring on a lot of other founders and people who have done really cool things to share their stories that I think can help you guys relate to the messages I'm going to be talking about on this podcast, and to help you guys grow and to help me grow, honestly, because this is an outlet that is going to allow me to have some super cool conversations. Hopefully you guys are excited for the content to come. I sure am. My name is Finn Hodgins, and this is the first episode of Dare to Win.